Hello, welcome back. It is week 190 on Out on That Line podcast. I'm Jeff with my co-host Alex. As always, Alex, how you doing this week?
Jeff, I just want to catch the people right off the top and let them know before you go any further, before you watch any more of this video, it is vital to our mission that you leave a comment. This is what we need, okay? YouTube is changing the game. They're doing wacky stuff with the algorithm. They're doing wacky stuff with like identity verification and age stuff. So really what's going to be very helpful to this channel as we navigate these choppy YouTube waters. We really need you to leave a comment. You can say, I don't want to say anything at all. I don't want to restrict you, but I also don't want to encourage you to be like, finally, the voices in my head will be heard. I try to make it relevant, try to make it uplifting. I'm not going to hold you to either of those things, but just like, leaving comments is the key. Okay. Engage with this. It's good for the slipstream. So this is my upfront pitch for youtube.com/C/out on that line. Subscribe, like, notifications, comments, for the love of God. That is what we are asking of you today. And then Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. And I think if we put it in perspective for folks, consider every comment one dog fed. Okay, folks, you don't want the dogs to starve, do you? Just one comment. That's all it takes. You can just tell us how much you love Alex's hat. That's all it takes. Yeah. If it's relevant to the video, that's even better. Let's tell us how you feel about us, how you're feeling today in general. We want to know. We want to know what you want us to talk about. But today we are going to talk about, Alex, and apparently there's more to this than even I thought. We're going to talk about Ethel Cain and the new album, Willoughby Tucker, I Will Always Love You. And apparently Ethel Cain has engaged in a bit of a controversy of late. Is that true?
Yes, not necessarily like of late, but certain behaviors along the way, and then of course certain tweets from back in the day, from almost 10 years ago, that have come to light. Because anytime your profile rises, people are gonna, if there are skeletons, people are gonna find them. And I think it's not just a simple case, and obviously, like, we're going to talk about the album and talk about these things in the context of the album. It's not just a referendum on Ethel Cain, but it's not just a simple case of bad tweets that were unearthed. There's kind of a bit of a history here that would suggest that Ethel Cain is an incredibly complicated person. And it manifests in the music in some surprising ways. So I had not heard of Ethel Cain at all. I saw the name pop up on some playlists, but it wasn't really, nothing really leapt out at me as like, this is must listen. But then I saw that this album came out and it was getting some good buzz. And so we talked about it and said, well, we should do this. And it was surprising. There was some territory that was Big Thief-esque, some Boy Genius flourishes, a little bit of the, I would say, like, tone and production style, not recorded the same way, but production style is Sloppy Jane, that Madison album we did way back when. There were a lot of like interesting musical and lyrical influences on this, and then the unique Ethel Cain twist. I'm not sure that all of it totally worked, but it was interesting, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. So what was your level of familiarity going into this, and what's kind of
zero? Basically, just heard the name, knew that, kind of pieced together that she was kind of in the, I guess, like the indie pop kind of sphere, in the kind of vein of like Clairo or even like a Mitski or something like that, like kind of in that grouping of artists, I suppose. Boy Genius, I think, was an apt comparison. Lucy Dacus, I think, was one of the suggested associated artists on Spotify, and certainly that fits. I think you're right. I think the album is a bit of a mixed bag. But is there any? I didn't know anything about any old tweets. Is it something you can talk about on the pod? Is it safe for pod? SFP?
SFP, yes, because I don't necessarily have specific tweets to read
Okay.
off. It's more, I mean, content-wise, it's the greatest hits, right? Some Islamophobic stuff, some,
Mm,
footsies with far-right ideals type thing. Um, and then Ethel Cain issued a response, and it pretty much covered the ground that you would think it would, which was, I as she describes it, when I was a young teenager, I was a social justice warrior. And then as I got a little bit older and wanted to rebel, I saw that a lot of my social justice warrior behavior was very cringe. So I overcorrected in the opposite direction and tried to push the envelope and say a lot of audacious, shitty things, ending on the notion that however you feel about me going forward is valid. So it was not necessarily an apology to any of these,
mhm,
people that might have been affected, but it was an acknowledgement of transgression. And I think sometimes that's the best you're going to get.
mhm.
And Ethel Cain, the impression that I get, especially from the music, is Ethel Cain is not one to really apologize for any of this material, certainly, but leave anything unexplored. And I know that sounds weird in the context of saying racist shit on Twitter,
Yeah.
but I think there's a tendency on Ethel Cain's part to kind of just talk out loud in many ways.
Mhm,
And that's not to make the lyrics sound tossed off. It's just they're very confessional, they're conversational. Even when they're being whimsical or they're being like, in the case of the song Nettles, very beautiful and heartbreaking.
mhm.
There's very much like a free flow, thinking out loud, sometimes nonlinear, sometimes very abstract structure to them. Um, but it sounds like Ethel Cain, the person, contains multitudes, good and bad.
Yeah, that's probably about right from what I've seen about her. I do, I think I went into this album like obviously you see an album and it's an hour and what 16 minutes or something a
Hour
lot longer.
13.
Yeah, hour 13, like something generally longer than than we like to see around these parts. Unless it's an artist we're familiar with and we know is they're likely to deliver on that. There was a lot of instrumental on this, so I looked through and it looked like there was not a lot of credits on this album overall. So my assumption is that she played a lot of the instruments. Is that correct?
It's my understanding is that this
Okay.
is an Ethel Cain vehicle. Yeah.
Okay. And which would lead me to believe also that she came up with a lot of the ideas of this. So there was, I don't know where you want to start kind of diving into this album. Do you want to start talking about like the general idea of it or certain specific songs? 'Cause I feel like there's a lot no matter which way we go.
It is kind of a weirdly hard album to approach. Like there's plenty of things you can pick apart once the conversation gets going, but I think this is maybe a good jumping off point, and I negate this whole thing as kind of an issue I had with it is there's no one element that really stuck out to me.
Mhm,
It's solid, it's interesting, but it's hard to articulate exactly what it is where nothing really jumped out and grabbed you by the throat. The music is it's a very interesting genre mix of like, southern gothic, dream pop, very folky. So there's a lot going on and it doesn't ever clash and it's very moody, but that's the thing is sometimes it feels like more of a mood
mhm,
than it is like concrete fleshed out like narrative. And again, not concept album. I
mhm,
hesitate to say narrative, but you look at something like Nettles, my favorite song on the album. That one to me is so successful because it has a strong narrative and a
mhm,
strong emotional through line, drawing on a lot of the thoughts and feelings that I think are Ethel Cain hallmarks as I understand them. You know, raised in a very religious household, rebelled against that, but also is like, I take, I don't fuck with the big C church, but I take the values with me. I don't regret the way I was raised, so on and so
Mhm.
forth. Creating a lot of like dichotomy within Ethel Cain. So that's the most interesting stuff. So when you can do that in something like Nettles, that sets her apart. The trans girl that was raised in a religious family managed to make this transition and be true to herself, doesn't fight with those values in which she's grounded in.
Mhm.
It's complex. It wasn't like a wholesale breaking with who she is or was or will be. Again, that's the most interesting material on the album.
Mhm.
The instrumentals are lovely, but having them on there and then having songs that don't really reach through the headphones and gut you, those become kind of ambient too. The whole thing kind of runs together into a mood as opposed to memorable songs, memorable records, memorable moments. Absent, again, for me, Nettles,
Mhm.
which absolutely does that and transports me to that place.
So I will absolutely agree with you. I think Nettles is the high point lyrically for the album for sure. I think it's the easiest to like digest song wise. I think too. I guess because it just feels the most traditional, I guess, in its structure to me. The musically though, the song that I really liked was "Fuck Me Eyes." That song I felt like was just a great pop song. And if there's going to be a single on this album, that's probably it. I will slightly agree with you on the instrumentals. Like I enjoyed those a lot. I think they just went on too long. We didn't need them to be 10 minutes long. I think that's part of the what I heard of them I enjoyed, but it would have been a lot better if it was only 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I think that's enough to get through a movement or two, in whatever musical piece. But I think that's what kind of tipped me off too, that she is the creative driving force behind a lot of this. And I think this album, I think, was an attempt also to show off. And I think there is going to be a group of people that this album is perfect for. That it's going to be a groundbreaking, moving album for them, because to me it was like, especially my first time listening through it, was fairly captivating in some moments. I think once you got past the surface, I think lyrically is where you kind of were left wanting a bit. And then once you've experienced those kind of longer movements in some of these musical interludes, they're not as surprising the second time. They don't stay as fresh. I think there's a couple points like Nettles, I think, is a song that will stay fresh. I think that's a song that's going to probably be one of her bellwethers. Um, I think "Fuck Me Eyes" is going to be one that sticks with me for sure because it's just a fun song. Probably going to show that one to Marla because I think that's exactly the kind of song she's going to like. But I think when you're kind of drumming up the controversy that it seemed, because it's I can't think it's a coincidence too much that we've been hearing all this stuff outside of the album about Ethel Cain right when there's an album that just came out by Ethel Cain. um I just can't imagine that's too much of a coincidence. um or if it's meant to, I'd like to see what her like monthly listener count was 3 months ago versus now, because she's at like 4 million something now. And I can't imagine that I would have never heard one single solitary peep about this person that had that many monthly listeners on Spotify when we've done so many albums in the exact orbit that she's part of. It just to me it would have been surprising.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, she had an album come out last year.
Mhm.
So again, another prolific songwriter who keeps it going, and that's fantastic. I would like to also chime in on "Fuck Me Eyes" and co-sign that. It's a great, like,
Mhm.
very accessible 80s pop song, or like as close as you're gonna get on this album. It's fun. It was a fun little break from the rest of it, which had this very like DIY sound and a very cinematic kind of texture to it. I wouldn't necessarily say scope, because I think it ran the gamut between like the scale of an indie film versus, summer blockbuster. Like some of the songs felt huge, some of them felt like very personal and very intimate. So I love that. I love that there was a lot of different texture running throughout the album. I think maybe the problem I have is the another thing you keyed in on, which was first listen, you're very taken with it.
Mhm.
Subsequent listens, the bloom is off the rose, and it doesn't become worse. It doesn't become bad. It just loses a little bit of the novelty, which there wasn't like a ton of novelty to the sound. It's just a new artist discovering what their sound is going to be. That's very pleasurable. You can go into someone like
Mhm.
Prince with certain expectations. Ethel Cain, I had no expectations and no idea what I was getting into. So it made for a great blind listen. And then when you go back to it, you're like, this isn't reinventing the wheel. This isn't putting a hat on a hat. But there was a lot of hype built up around this. And you find someone who's as complicated as she is, not every song rose to the level of how interesting I think she is as a person. And
Mhm.
whether or not she's like an out and out shithead or whatever anybody thinks of her, TBD, the jury's still out. But I think controversial people are often the most interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's what's going to make it a pretty just solid stream it for me on this one. I think where I'd like to see Ethel Cain go, and this is obviously has no bearing on on where she's actually going to do, but there's a couple points where it sounded like kind of grungy and a little bit like heavy, kind of like 90s alt kind of sound. Like that would be a great place for her to go, because that was where I found the most enjoyment in the album. For me personally. Now, if that's not where she wants to go, my recommendation would be let's cut down on some of those instrumentals just a bit, or just do an album that's all instrumentals. Just get it out of your system. But let's cut down on those a little bit.
I really enjoyed the instrumentals. I agree that some of them, a lot of them, made the album feel a lot longer than it did as a whole. Like when I listened to it, it didn't necessarily come across as an hour and 13 minutes. Didn't feel
Yeah,
laborious
agreed.
like that. Yeah. But there were individual moments where I was like, whoa, listen, King Giz guy over here. I can, prog rock guy. I can put up with long stretches. Grateful Dead guy. It's not a problem, but it is kind of a weird. I think it speaks to hanging on to one musical thought for too long. I think the Willoughby interlude and the Willoughby theme are great. Sort of kind of overstay their welcome just a hair. Um Waco, if it were not such a quality, and it's not an instrumental, but Waco, if it were not such quality as an album closer, I'd be like, you're out of your mind ending with this like 15-minute dirge about like conflict and religious zealotry. Like this is the placement on this is weird,
Yeah.
which there were some weird placements on the album, but I think that's fine. It shook things up a little bit, and I think was part of the reason why it didn't feel quite so long. Putting the 15-minute song anywhere else maybe actually would have been a bad idea. Maybe I talked myself into it being in the end, because you start with it or you end with it. Giz will start off the top with long songs, or
Mhm.
you end with it. There's a little bit of an endurance factor in this one to an extent, but I think there's enough sonically, enough lyrically, if not necessarily based on the things that I heard, as deep as I would have wanted. Like a lot of
Mhm.
the kind of hype, the pro Ethel Cain hype is like, oh, these lyrics, these themes, you just won't believe it. And it didn't really clobber me the way that I think the hype train would have made me expect. So maybe that's what hurt this album the most for me, is it had a ton of hype and I had no precedent for what to
Mhm.
expect. And then I came in and listened to this and finally put all the pieces together and went, it's really good. It's really good, but it's not great.
Mhm.
It's not super novel. It didn't blow my hair back. It didn't give me our new favorite term, the woe boner. It didn't give me the woe boner, but that doesn't make it, not a good album. So I will co-sign the idea of a stream it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair one. I think hopefully people agree with that. I think generally they will. This one might be one we get some angry comments about. I think there's some pretty diehard, some Ethel Cain diehards out there. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm looking forward to next episode, Alex, because we already know what we're going to do. So I'm going to tell the people right now that it's going to be the Deftones, folks. It's been a while since they released an album. They're coming out with a new one. It comes out as we're recording this. It comes out tomorrow, and I'm very excited for that.
Oh, absolutely. Now, truth be told, I thought we were covering the Delphonics. Did not blow your mind this time. But apparently not. It's going to be a great episode. It's going to be a corker. It's going to be an absolute creamer. And there's only one place. Okay, technically two, because you can listen to this on Spotify. We never plug the Spotify. So, you can hear this in podcast form, take it wherever you go. But really the main hub for excitement, and you folks know this, is youtube.com/C/out on that line. When that, excuse me, that's better. When that next video drops, when we decide to start doing reaction videos again, when we drizzle little treats all over the place like an untrained labradoodle, you will only find it at our very exclusive YouTube channel. So make sure that you are subscribed. Click the bell so that you always get notifications when we dribble treats, and hit the thumbs up because it lets us know that we're doing a good job. But most importantly, you got to leave those comments. We thrive on them. We thrive on the feedback. We thrive on their algorithmic power. Oh, don't we love how we can manipulate our own destiny with just a little bit of help from y'all? So come on. What are we doing here? Every week. It's every week. Every week that you don't join, it's just this little ulcer that I have, this little pyloric ulcer, and it grows. It speaks to me in my sleep, and it tells me to do unspeakable things. So if you want to prevent that, or if you want to see that, I don't care. I'll do whatever. I'm at your mercy. Okay, I'm your little monkey. I'll put on my little vest, my little fez, my little cymbals, and I'll just sit there and I'll clang. I'll play whatever tune you want. Okay, I don't want to speak for Jeff, but I am a shameless whore. So just tell me what you want me to fuck at youtube.com/C/out on that line.
I got nothing I could possibly add to that, folks. Until next time.